Miss Oakley. Young people. And you know you're all young people because you're not 95. You got a governor in the house. Be sure these young people who are voting for the first time get registered. I want you to go home, canvass your neighborhood, find out who needs a ride to the poll. Start now. We cannot let somebody else win this. So, I get the opportunity to introduce our next governor.
Let's hear it for Opal Lee. Fort Worth, I am so grateful that each of you would take some time on your Thursday evening to be here with us. We know that there are others who are still driving in at this very moment, getting their parking space, walking over right now, coming in and join us and be part of something very special. Something that you all started 5 years ago. The first time we met right here in this room. And we decided that together we were going to do something pretty special. And with your help, I became the first Democrat to win Tarrant County since 1994. And with your help, we are going to win the state of Texas in November of 2022. We're going to do this together. We're going to do this together. We're going to do this because we are fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, her own health care. We're doing this because we're fighting for every child to be going to every single classroom without worrying about being shot with a weapon of war. We're going to win this because we're going to fight for every educator in every classroom to be paid enough so they can work 2 or 3 jobs. We're going to win this because we are sick and tired of living in a state with a governor who seeks to make us afraid of one another or tell us who we are supposed to hate next. We were just in Decatur earlier today. Great town hall meeting just like this. And this woman came up to me and she said, "Hey Beto, was never politically involved before until last year." That's when they came after my son, who happens to be transgender. Because you see now in Texas, thanks to Greg Abbott, because she is raising a transgender child, she and he have a target on their backs. This governor has accused her of child abuse, and if that accusation is sustained, they'll take that child that she is loving the heck out of right now, doing everything she can to help him come through at his moment of truth, and really by extension ours. And if that accusation by the governor is sustained, not only is that child taken away, but every other kid in the household is as well. Turned over to Child Protective Services, which happens to run the worst foster care program in the United States, bar none right now. And you know what we said? She and I agreed. He wanted her to give up, to just submit, to say the heck with it. If she had the privilege and the money to move to some other state where she wouldn't be attacked. It's the same thing that the kid who is gay right now, who's wondering if he's going to be able to marry the love of his life when he grows up, is going to have to go somewhere else because marriage equality is under attack. Or the immigrant who keeps hearing these warnings of invasions and taking matters into our own hands. And Texans, you must defend yourselves against these people who are coming to get us and to take our jobs and to rape the people in our lives. When we know that the vast majority of those who come to this country make us better by their very presence, safer by their very presence, more successful by their very presence. In Greg Abbott's Texas, it's you or me. In our Texas, it's you and me. It is all of us together all the time. Republicans, we're glad that you're here. Democrats, you're welcome as well. Independents, you're in the right place. We say in this campaign, no me importa. We do not care about the differences between us. We will not allow them to divide us or to determine our future. We're going to make sure that every single Texan is treated the same, equally under the law, and that we all have opportunities to succeed going forward. If you are too poor right now in Fort Worth to be able to see a doctor or fill your prescription for insulin or take your kiddo to a mental health care provider in the least insured state in America, one where the county jails are the biggest provider of mental health care services in the state today, one where more kids die of diabetes than in any other. Well, I'm here to tell you, we are fighting to win, and when we do, we are expanding Medicaid so that everybody can see that provider, fill that prescription, be able to get that care and help that they need to live up to their true potential, fulfill their promise. We just want you to be healthy enough and well enough to be able to do whatever you were placed on this planet to do in the first place. If that's raising your family, going to work, finishing your education, starting a rock and roll band, or running for public office, that don't matter to us. We just want you to be able to do it right here in the state of Texas. The kicker is, if we follow the lead of great public servants like Senator Royce West, who's been working on this issue day in and day out throughout his career, not only do we connect more people with care, hire more providers into our community, no longer have to see our fellow Texans getting arrested on purpose to have their untreated schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or clinical depression taken care of in a jail cell instead of at a clinic or with a provider or someone who actually is going to be able to help them. Not only do we stand up more of these closed rural hospitals, 16 of them have been closed down since Greg Abbott has taken office, and more are on the way. Not only do we help people get the care that they need in communities where they have to drive hundreds of miles in order to be able to do that, but we'll also be able to lower your property tax bill in the bargain. Because when we bring that $10 billion back that is sitting on a table in Washington, D.C., our federal income taxes that we paid up every single year, flowing back down to Texas to make sure that we have this care, you're no longer on the hook for uncompensated care that you pay for on your county tax bill. So when someone gets too sick and cannot take the suffering anymore and goes to the hospital right here in Tarrant County, the outcomes are not going to be as good as they would have been otherwise. The complications are too severe. You held out for too long. And the care will be exponentially more expensive. But even if you don't have a dime to your name or an insurance card in your wallet, it's not like the bill disappears. It just gets spread out to all of us in the form of higher property taxes. So what if, in the state that invented Medicaid in 1965, which was when LBJ signed the act into law, we took yes for an answer and brought that money back home and connected everyone with the care that they needed? What if we ask this of ourselves? We want you, no matter where you're raised in this state, to find your purpose, your calling, and fulfill your potential right here. We'd love for you to do it in Fort Worth or Dallas, but in these communities that we were just in, of Decatur and Mineral Wells and Cleburne, Far East Texas, rural, remote Panhandle, wherever you are, want to make sure that you get your share of state resources, that we invest in broadband internet in rural communities, that we make sure that, look, if you want to be able to go to college to be a nurse, a doctor, a school teacher in the classroom, that cost is no object, especially in underserved communities for jobs that we are struggling to hire for. Let's make sure that we pay some of that way or clear your debt. And if you don't want to go to college, you want to be able to get to work right away. You want to become an electrician, a welder, a pipe fitter, a plumber. You want to be able to learn a trade and a competitive skill that will allow you to command a true living wage. Then I want to make sure you have every opportunity to do that. And I also want to make sure that unions have the right to organize and provide that path to prosperity right here in the state of Texas. We can do that. If you're wondering why more than 7 million of our fellow Texans did not participate in the last election in 2020, 7 million who were eligible to cast a ballot but did not vote. And you know that they're not lazy. You know that there's no lack of love for this great democracy. You know something else is afoot. And when we dig a little bit deeper, we find out that this is the toughest state in the union, bar none, in which to cast a ballot or in which to register to vote. But it's not tough equally on everyone. More than 750 polling places have closed in the state of Texas in the last decade, in the fastest growing state in the union. Twice as many as the next closest state, and predictably, most of those polling place closures have taken place in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods in this state. When you have a gerrymander that allows those in power to pick their voters instead of the other way around, where if you're black or brown, there's a good chance you've been drawn out of a district to minimize the power and impact and likelihood that you will vote at all. And when you see one ballot drop-off location per county in the midst of a pandemic that has taken nearly 100,000 of our fellow Texans, including one ballot drop-off box in Harris County, where there are more people than the entire state of Nevada, well, now you know what we're up against today. In this great democracy, and in this great state, the greatest of the 50, if you ask me, our right to vote is under attack, unlike any other place, unlike any other time since the era of Jim Crow. But in the same way that we met that challenge then, we must meet this one now. And I turn to Opal Lee, who introduced us, who at the age of 95 is asking all of us young people, anyone under the age of 95, to think about what we are willing to do. And to remind us that not only is this possible to overcome these attacks and these challenges, but that we've done it before against much greater odds. One of the things that Opal Lee has shared with me and taught me and inspired me with is the story of her life. Moving to Fort Worth from Marshall, Texas at a young age, and her parents having the audacity in the 1930s to purchase a home in a primarily white Anglo neighborhood in this community. And how on June 19th, 1939, a white mob in Fort Worth, Texas, burned her house down to the ground. And as her father tried to defend her and her family and protect their possessions and their home, Fort Worth police officer said, "Sir, if you use that firearm against this mob right here, I will turn them loose on your family." It was reported widely in newspapers here in Texas and across the country. But that moment did not deter her or define her future. She made it her mission and her will to make sure that Juneteenth would mean something, not just for her or those who look like her, but for each and every single one of us. A reminder of how far we have yet to go to fully realize the promise of this democracy and the founding of this country, that we are all created equal and should have equal opportunity under the law. So, from 1939, going forward, she worked with the people in this community as an educator, as a civic activist, just as a leader, bringing people in one conversation at a time about the history of our state and the future that we could have together. And then somewhere in her mid-80s, when most people are starting to wind down, she begins a more than 2,000-mile journey on foot from Fort Worth to Washington, D.C. to make sure that she gets the attention of those in the halls of Congress, those in these positions of public trust and power, including the President of the United States. I think 3 administrations in a row that she worked on. And just last year, she won recognition of Juneteenth as the first federally recognized holiday in the United States of America in 30 years. Openly, right here in Fort Worth, Texas. That's who we are. And so a reminder, not only can we do this, we've done it before against much greater odds. For the women in the room right now who don't just feel under attack, you are under attack. You're under attack unlike any other place in the developed world that I can think of right now. A total ban on abortion with no exception for rape, no exception for incest, in a state that leads the developed world in the rate of maternal mortality, 3 times as deadly for black women. Because when you foreclose every opportunity for an abortion, you're also turning people away from the chance to get a cervical cancer screening, or any family planning help at all, or just to see a doctor in the least insured state in the country. I want you to know that now is not the time for any of us to give up hope, or to submit to these current conditions, or to accept this somehow as our future, or our fate, or our fortune. We've been up against longer odds before, and we've overcome them. 50 years ago, 1972, it was also completely illegal in the state of Texas to get an abortion. But 3 Texas women, Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade, Linda Coffey, who lives next door in Dallas, Texas, and Sarah Weddington, Jane Roe's other attorney from Bright Blue, Abilene, successfully argued for the protection of the right to privacy, to make very personal, often very painful decisions for women, by women, on their own. And they prevailed upon an all-male United States Supreme Court for that landmark decision in 1973, Roe versus Wade, that stood the test of time for nearly half a century. This is my case that I'm making to you. Not only can we do it, we've done it before against much greater odds. No one saved the day for us. No one rode into the rescue. There was no cavalry. We were the cavalry. Texas women won that right back in 1973. And it is Texas women who will win that back in 2022. We can do this. It is up to us to decide. But if we need some encouragement right now, I mean, look around this room. 3 months away from an election that will decide the future of this state, and by extension, I would argue, the United States of America. This many people are coming together to make sure that we do what it takes with what we have, where we are, to bring this home. And it's not just the feeling that we have here in this room. When we posted our fundraising numbers over the last 4 months, we outraised the sitting governor by $3 million. $3 million. 500,000 unique contributions. The biggest group of donors to this campaign, Texas school teachers. Yeah. At the beginning of this race, the polls had us down 15 points. Pretty discouraging. They just took the measure again of Texas last month. We picked up 10 points. We're only 5 down and gaining ground right now. We have 83,000 volunteers and counting who signed up to take a shift, knocking on doors, meeting our fellow Texans, those 7 million who have been drawn out of our democracy, who the governor and the majority in the state legislature, against the valiant efforts of Democratic legislatures who is willing to walk out to deny them the quorum to keep them from destroying our democracy. Nonetheless, they prevented millions from being able to vote. Those are the very millions that we want to be able to bring back into this election. The only way to do it, though, is for you to choose to knock on their door. You may see the TV ad that we produce, or hear the radio spot that we run, or read that mailer that we send to your mailbox, or it may collect dust on your kitchen counter. But you'll never forget someone who knocks on your door, connects with you face to face, eyeball to eyeball, human being and human being. Listen, in this deeply divided moment, in this highly digital age where we're consumed by these personal devices, and we never wander away from those who agree with us, who share our convictions, who are on the same feed that we're on. When you show up at that door, you break through all of that stuff. And from your own heart, and in your own words, you describe to that future voter why this election is so important to you. And with your own ears, you listen to them about what's most important in their lives. I tell you what, we make a connection in that moment, and that person is far more likely to turn out. We only lost to Ted Cruz by 216,000 votes in 2018. There's 7 million people out there whose votes we have yet to count, whose voices we have yet to hear from. Wouldn't it be something if all of us here tonight agreed to sign up with these great volunteers who are wearing the yellow vests today, signed up for a block walking shift, got out there, met those voters, bring them in, and then they become the margin of victory when we win this thing on the night of November 8th. That's the spirit of Oklahoma. That's the spirit of Texas. We can do this. We just have to decide that we will. And then listen to what we can do. If Greg Abbott's Texas is it's you or me and ours is you and me, let me tell you what we do when we come together. For those school teachers and counselors and librarians and bus drivers and cafeteria workers, everyone who makes public education possible, imagine if we raise the wage we pay them so they don't have to work a second or a third job. Imagine those retired teachers who have not seen a cost of living adjustment since the year 2004, getting one every single year going forward. Imagine listening to teachers in the classroom who say, hey Beto, I need more time to connect with those kids right now. The kids I'm literally trying to keep alive. And so we hear them out and we cancel the STAR test in the state of Texas so they can do that right now. And then we make sure that we have a leader in this state who will always listen to them because that leader has been there, and we appoint a classroom teacher as the next TEA commissioner in the state of Texas. Teachers, I want you to know we got your back. And for another group of great public servants, people who've struggled and sacrificed to make this country better, every woman or man who's ever worn the uniform of the United States of America, I want to thank you for your service, but I want to do more than that. All of us want to do more than that. We want to make sure that in a state that boasts a $2 trillion GDP, that we ensure that no veteran sleeps on the streets tonight or under a bridge or in a city park. We pay any price, move any mountain to make sure you're taken care of. Regardless of whether the VA can figure out this issue with toxic burn pit exposure for those veterans who've just come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, I want to tell you, I listened to your predecessors who came back from Vietnam, those who waited 40 years for their exposure to Agent Orange to be treated as the presumptive condition for the cancers and diseases and conditions that were consuming them and still doing so today. And they've said, hey, we're not going to wait 40 years for any other generation that follows. We in Texas will stand up a toxic burn pit registry to make sure that we connect every veteran with that care. And when they tell us, hey, Beto, don't want to go into the VA, and for my PTSD, traumatic brain injury, MST, I don't want to be prescribed an opioid to which I may become addicted and from which I may die. Listening to you, here's my commitment. We're going to legalize cannabis in the state of Texas. And make sure you can use what makes you feel right here. These are the big things that we can do together. When you go home tonight, or when you're talking to a friend over the weekend, or you return to work on Monday, and they say, hey, I know that you went out to see Beto when he came to Fort Worth. What's this guy about? Say, look, he talked about world-class schools and getting behind our teachers. He wanted the best jobs in America to be created right here. And he wants to make sure that if you work that job, you work just one. He's going to get behind unions, lift the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15. He's going to make sure that you can see a doctor, fill a prescription, see a mental health care provider. He's going to expand Medicaid. These are common sense, bipartisan ideas. World-class schools, great jobs, the ability to see a doctor, protecting our freedoms and our rights. The very freedoms and rights that those veterans put their lives on the line to defend in the first place. And for women, it is not just bodily autonomy, it's protecting against the next bad idea that's coming down the pike. I know that you all saw what Clarence Thomas wrote in his concurring opinion to the Dobbs decision. He said, next on the chopping block is your right to access contraception. Following that, we're going to revive the sodomy laws in our states and outlaw same-sex intimacy, and then we're going after marriage equality. Let me tell you this. We together, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Americans, Texans, human beings first, are going to stand up and fight for your right to be just who you are right here in the state of Texas, each and every single day. We're going to do this. Last thing that I want to say before we have a chance to take your questions. It is now more than 11 weeks since 19 children were slaughtered in their classroom. 2 teachers who had already sacrificed the best years of their lives connecting with those kids and other kids just like them, who died literally to try to preserve the lives of those kids in those classrooms. More than 11 weeks after an 18-year-old man in this state legally purchased 2 AR-15s, weapons originally designed for use in combat and war, because they're so devastatingly effective at taking an enemy soldier down at a distance. That high-impact, high-velocity round just destroys everything inside your body. I heard a doctor use the phrase, liquefy. It was the same doctor who was there to meet the bodies of those kids who were killed in that classroom at Robb Elementary in Uvalde. The same doctor who had to identify their bodies by the shoes that they were wearing or the DNA sample that he could get from them. More than 11 weeks. And a governor who could call a special session to go after teachers in the classroom and CRT. A governor who could call a special session to weaken our democracy and attack our right to vote. A governor who could call a special session to go after transgender kids in Texas could not be bothered to call a special session to make it any less likely that our kids entering the classroom this week or next are going to have a better chance of surviving the school year. I promise you this. We're going to put the lives of our kids over the profits of the gun industry, the special interests of the NRA, or any other politician in the state of Texas. We're going to do the right thing for and by one another right here in the state of Texas. We will get this done. I promise you this. Imagine having a governor who can keep the lights on and the heat running. He's going to ensure that your water doesn't freeze in your pipes. Those same pipes that burst and destroy your floorboards and cause mold to run up your walls and destroy that home that you paid for and built over the course of your working life. A governor who allowed his buddies, these energy pipeline CEOs and energy traders, to make $11 billion over 5 days when more than 700 of our fellow Texans froze to death in their homes, burned up trying to stay warm in their apartments, died next to their parents of carbon monoxide poisoning in their garage trying to stay warm, and then didn't fix the grid, made it no less likely that we would freeze this next February, and then passed the bill on to each and every single one of us, $45 more per month, per utility bill, per ratepayer. You add that to the $20 billion more that we're paying in property taxes on his watch over the last 7 years, and he's the single greatest driver of inflation in the state of Texas. And the thing is, there is a fix that Democrats and Republicans alike can get behind, like winterizing and weatherizing every part of the grid so that gas doesn't freeze at the wellhead, like making sure that we connect ERCOT to the national grid so that we can pull down electricity, sell it back up if we need to, and like going after that $11 billion that was stolen from us and returning it to every ratepayer in the state of Texas. That's what we need to do. So listen, all of this is ours if we'll do the work right now. We are so close, gaining ground every day. Folks coming out to these events, the crowds are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. More people signing up to knock on doors. You all feel it, you see it, you know it. Don't let anyone else tell you different. This is going to happen, but you've got to make it so. So before we leave here today, someone in a yellow vest is going to ask you to sign up for a block walk shift. And when you're considering your answer, just think about how you want to feel on the morning of November 9th, the day after this election. Do you want to have any regret left in your mind? Anything that could have been left inside that you wanted to have out on the field? Or do you have the most glorious hangover you have ever felt in your life because we're celebrating the most historic victory in the history of the state of Texas? You ready to win this? Let's go win this! Thank you for coming out, Fort Worth. Thank you, Tarrant County. Le agradezco. Muchísimas gracias. All right, so we've got another microphone here. And our best hope, I mean, this is the theory of the case with us, is that we have a better opportunity of representing you and delivering for you and working with our partners in the state legislature if we first had the chance to listen to you and learn from you and understand what your expectations are, your concerns, your questions, the opportunities in your life. So Cynthia Cano, who's right here in the white shirt and the black hat, she will bring you the microphone, and all we ask is to make your question or your comment brief. I'll try to be brief in my response. We'll get as many people into the conversation as possible. The microphone's feeding back just a little bit. If we could turn it down un poquito. She's wearing one of these great Mothers Against Greg Abbott t-shirts. Thank you.
The first thing I want to say is thank you for showing up for the people of Texas. And I know I've watched your town halls, and I know you talked about having a citizen-led committee to do redistricting. And I actually, in January, will be redistricted all the way out to Texarkana, and I'm in Frisco.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm no longer districted with my neighbors in McKinney and, that have the same issues as I do. What I want to know is, will you be able to do this before 2024?
Great question. So listen, those who love democracy, and I'm not going to make this a partisan issue because, little secret, Democrats, when they're in power, they try to draw themselves to stay in power. When Republicans are in power, they do the same. This is not a partisan condition, this is a human condition. That's why we've got to get politicians, myself, Greg Abbott, or otherwise, out of the room, and you all have to draw the boundaries yourselves, because while we're both Texans, those of us in Fort Worth and in Texarkana and Frisco, we have different interests, different experiences. Those are different parts of the state. They should have different representatives. The question asked is, can we do this before 2024? The answer is no, and I just want to be honest with you. This is done after every decennial census. So they'll take the count again in 2030, and in that next legislative session in 2031, they will redraw the boundaries of this state. And either we're at the table or we're not. And what Democrats who happen to be the democracy-loving party in the state of Texas right now, so often fail to do, present company included, is to play for that long game. And we get all excited on the eve of the 2020 election, as we did this last time, when we really should have started working for 2020 in 2011 and 2012 and 2013. And you build that up, and ultimately you have the capacity to win these important state legislative elections. So here's what we're doing today. When you helped us win Tarrant County in 2018, you got us a lot closer to being able to do that. We picked up, though we didn't defeat Ted Cruz, we picked up 12 state house seats. 12 Democrats replacing Republicans. We picked up Colin Allred in the United States House of Representatives, flipping control of that institution from Republicans to Democrats. 17 black women were elected to judicial positions in Harris County. So we know this works. So it is very important that when you are voting in November, we're talking a lot about this governor's race and the challenge that we have against Greg Abbott. There are other critically important statewide elections for Lieutenant Governor, where you have Mike Collier, Attorney General with Rochelle Garza, Ag Commissioner Susan Hayes, Janet Dunning, who's running to be our comptroller, Jay Clayburgh, our next land commissioner, Luke Wolford, who's running to be our railroad commissioner. But it's also these state legislative seats. We are only 9 down from a democracy-loving majority going forward. We need to work on that. We need to win it this year. We don't win it this year, we need to win it in 2024. We don't win it then, on down the line until we do. Look, this is hard work. Think about that story from Opal Lee. It begins in 1939. It does not end until 2021. She never gave up. The persistence, the courage, the tenacity, the strength, the fortitude, that's hers, but it's also ours if we're willing to be inspired by that. So it will not be easy to make these improvements to our democracy, like nonpartisan redistricting or automatic voter registration or same-day voter registration, or replacing Confederates Day as a state holiday with Election Day as a state holiday so people can vote and do something to make us proud. But these are the things that we've got to do. Thanks for asking the question.
Hi Beto, how are you?
Good, thanks for coming out.
Hey, so I'm 18 years old from Colleyville, Texas. I don't know if anybody here is from Colleyville. Yeah. So if you don't know, Colleyville is a very conservative city in North Texas. And we've had our, it's a very troubling area for many. And it's really sad because I just graduated this past year, and so many of my teachers have left the district. And they all say it's a lack of respect that they feel. They feel that they are disrespected. And unfortunately, I know even more teachers that are planning on leaving in the next year or two, and it's for the same reason. And so I think on behalf of these teachers, on behalf of my peers who have loved these teachers and had such an impact on me as well, I wonder, what are you going to do to ensure that these teachers get the respect they deserve?
All right.
First, I just want to acknowledge that we have a first-time voter in the room right here. And then I think he just expressed what all of us feel, right? For those of us who had a great public school education, I'm one of them. We remember that teacher who was transformative in our lives. For me, 6th grade, Mesquite Elementary, Mary Stromer, who believed in me for some reason and helped me to believe in myself. You're entering middle school, you're awkward, I was especially so. You lack self-confidence, you wonder whether you're on the right planet, what you're gonna do in life. And this woman believed in me, and where I struggled, she assisted me, but she also held me to the highest standard, a standard I didn't think I could achieve, and just expected me to get there. And I did in her class. I overcame some real hurdles and obstacles. No way I would have done it without her. You all have similar experiences, similar teachers in your lives, and it's not just the academics, though they are important. I heard so many stories from you about the kid in that class who's on free and reduced breakfast and lunch, though that teacher knows there's no warm meal for her to go home to. So out of her own pocket, even though she's still underpaid, she's working 2 jobs, maybe 3, she pays for that meal for that kid so that there are some calories to burn while she's doing that homework that was assigned by that teacher. Or the kid who shows up in the same dirty jeans and dirty t-shirt, probably dirty socks and dirty chones every single day. By the end of that week, a new set of clothes that teacher's purchased for that child so he can hold his head up high and learn right next to those kids next to him, right? That's what these teachers are doing. At a time where so many of these kids, 2 years of the pandemic, 2 years of learning loss, 2 years of trauma. In many cases, they've lost their grandparents. Their folks have lost their jobs. They may have lost a home. They're bouncing from one house to the next. I talked to a teacher named Maxine in Laredo, Texas. And part of her opposition to the STAR test, she said, hey, Beto, the level of suicidal ideation that I'm seeing in my middle school right now, the fact that a 14-year-old girl successfully took her life really concerns me. I'm trying to keep these kids alive right now. And to the gentleman's question, she said, so many of my colleagues are leaving this school. And I want to leave too because I am no match for the task in front of me. But if I leave, who's going to be there for these kids? My youngest, Henry, just completed the 5th grade. And for the entire academic year, some fans of the 5th grade over there. For the entire academic year, he did not have a permanent classroom teacher. And God loved the subs, but having that permanent, consistent person who shows up day in, days out, knows how Henry's doing, how he can do better, how his classmates are performing, how to pull the best out of them, how to stoke that curiosity and pull that lifelong love of learning out of them. So when you do, there's no stopping that kid, right? And there's no stopping all of us by extension. The fact that we cannot keep these teachers in the classroom, yes, it's a matter of pay. And yes, it's a matter of respect to those retired teachers who, in addition to not having a cost of living adjustment since the year of our Lord, 2004, also have to contend with something known as the windfall elimination provision, which docks them for public service by withholding their Social Security because probably at some point in Texas, we got sick and tired of retired teachers getting so filthy rich at public expense, living in those big mansions, lighting $100 bills on fire just to taunt us. And we said, we're going to stop this insanity, and we kept that money from them. So it's the money for sure, but this gentleman just used a really important word, it's the respect. When your governor's saying, hey, you can't teach the story of Opal Lee in this state because that is CRT. When your governor's saying, hey, I want you to turn in the parents of that transgender child right now. When you have a governor who's politicizing you, when others are accusing you of grooming, when they're going to introduce bills this next legislative session to make it even harder for you to stay in the profession, and for crying out loud, you took on tens of thousands of dollars in debt for the very privilege of teaching our kids, and this is the way that we treat you right now. When we win this election, the teachers in Texas are getting the dignity and the respect that they deserve, each and every single one of us. Most importantly, from the governor, our great friends in the state legislature, and the people of Texas, and we bring these teachers back in. We make sure that they know they are our most valued public servants today, tomorrow, forever. Thank you for asking the question. Ms. Cano.
Over here to your right, a little bit to your right, in the middle, in the center. Here we go.
Okay, great.
Okay, first I'm going to ask the kids to cover their ears. Stop, Greg Abbott. I am a mother of special needs children, and it's really hard to live in the U.S. and Texas, and I was wondering what you could promise families like mine.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking this question. It's near and dear to my heart. My sister grew up with special needs and was in special education classes. And it gets to this question that was asked earlier. We saw her special ed teachers struggle to be able to connect with these kids when the teacher to student ratio might be 20 to 1 one day, it might be 30 to 1 the next day, it might be 40 to 1. You see, Texas has artificially capped how many special needs students we actually have. They said there will be no more than this many special needs students, so we're only going to fund special education to this level. So if we love our educators in Texas, and we do, let's have a special prayer and shout for our special ed educators who are doing the God's Lord's work right now in the state of Texas. addition to fully funding these positions and the teachers' aides that they need, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 teachers to a classroom to really get the job done and make sure these kids receive this important individual attention, we also have to do something about a wait list for state-supported services in the state of Texas for your kids that is 18 years long. When my sister graduated from high school, my mom tried to get on the list. We'll see you in 18 years. And she said, my daughter's 18 years old right now. Why didn't you tell me when she was born, when she was 1, when she was 2? We would have got on it then. Now listen, this is not a matter of resources. We're a $2 trillion economy, 9th largest on the planet. Our biannual budget is $250 billion. We don't lack for resources. All we lack for is the political will to prioritize on literally the most vulnerable among us. So let us fully fund state-supported services for every Texan so that they have the best learning, the best quality of life, the best independence of living. We don't want them institutionalized, taken away from their families. We want them to grow up and live to their full potential. But when you connect this with that foster care program I talked about, where we lost the lives of 100 kids in foster care since the year 2020, last year and a half in the state of Texas, where CPS tonight, some of those offices, will see kids sleeping in the hallways, under the tables, atop the desks. Again, not for lack of resources. They just don't have a political action committee or a billionaire donor who can get Greg Abbott's attention to make sure that they're a priority going forward. That 51st in the nation in mental health care access that leaves so many in our communities literally on the streets, medicating themselves by purchasing illegal drugs or getting arrested on purpose because there's no other way to seek help right now. I talked about it not being you or me, but you and me. And if it's going to be all of us, it absolutely has to be all of us. So I just want you to know, for your kiddo, for my sister, for every Texan living with a disability, every parent of a special needs child, we've got your back. We're going to fight for you. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that your kiddos have every opportunity that everyone else does. And listen, let me just say this, because sometimes I will throw a swear word down or two, and I promise you that I'm trying to get better at this, and my kids are constantly reminding me that I should not hold them to a certain standard and then do something else. Let me say this about Greg Abbott, and I mean this honestly. And about his supporters, some of whom are in the room, and we're grateful that they're here, right? The only way I think that we're going to be able to move forward as a state, as a country, as a democracy, is to find some common ground. And we've got to choose the best of our ability. We won't always be perfect. I am almost never perfect, but we've got to try to do better. To find that common ground, it only comes when we choose to respect one another and, despite our differences, find out what we can do together to make this place better. Now, do I think Greg Abbott wakes up wanting kids to be shot in their school, or for the grid to fail, or for these children to be abused in CPS custody and care? No one does, right? But what I think, and the whole premise of this campaign and the case that we're making against him, is that he is either unable or unwilling to do the things necessary to make it better for all of us in Texas. So we gotta turn the page. But we want to be respectful to everyone, bring everyone in, and we welcome our Republican, Independent, Democratic, for that matter, brothers and sisters to this effort. It's got to be all of us. Ms. Kano, where are you in this room? Here we go.
First off, thank you for being the next governor of Texas. My name is Jordan. I grew up in Lake Worth. Down the road down here, and I'm also a U.S. Air Force veteran. And I'm also an atheist. I say this because it's one of the fastest growing groups, populations in the country, in the state. And one of our biggest concerns is the separation of church and state, which is struggling by the day. And the second issue is Christian nationalism, which we've heard from the other side. So could you give us your thoughts on both of those, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thanks for serving our country as an Air Force veteran. Thanks for coming out here today. And we talked about this extraordinary democracy that we've inherited from those who fought for it, died for it. They did it in uniform going all the way back to 1776. They decided a pretty consequential issue at Appomattox in 1865. As LBJ reminded this country in his voting rights speech in 1965, they also did it on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. People willing to lose their lives to make sure that everyone would have the right to vote and to participate. And these founding ideals that we all aspire to achieve but haven't yet fully realized, like that we're all created equal and that we all will be treated equally under the law. I'd like to think that we're going to keep moving until we get there in that right direction, and that none of us will be compelled by our differences, including religious differences, if we are a minority, to accept the majority view or to do something that is at odds with our faith or our core values. The separation between church and state is just as foundational as any other part of this great, exceptional democracy in the United States of America. And today, on so many of these debates that we're having, and I mentioned a lot of them on contraception, on marriage equality, on same-sex intimacy, on the right to make your own decisions about your own body, the right to be able to seek an abortion, there is a difference of opinion, and we should respect that, right? Your personal views are yours. I respect that. I'm not here to try to persuade you to anything different. I'm here to try to see how together we can find some common ground and do better. But when you try to compel me based on a theological view or your religion or your lack thereof of a religion, that's a totally different ballgame. And I've got to think right now that when the best science and evidence says otherwise, when we remind ourselves of the human toll in this maternal mortality rate that again is 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas, that today we lead the country in the rate not just of teen pregnancy, but repeat teen pregnancy. When we're meeting women at meetings just like this, who tell us about an ectopic pregnancy that they had, or a spontaneous abortion that occurred when they were trying to carry that child to term. They'd already chosen the name for that kiddo, and it was the last thing that they wanted to happen to them. A woman who approached me in Cleburne yesterday and said that the doctor said that that fetus inside of her was no longer viable. And at this point, if she continued to carry, it might compromise her life. But he could not advise her to receive the operation that she needed here in the state of Texas. She was lucky enough and had the privilege that allowed her to afford to travel to another state to be able to do that. That's when religion begins to get involved in our lives and when it can cost the lives of the people here in this state. So I want to respect religion and religious differences and your right to pray or choose the faith that makes the most sense for you, or to not pray or not choose a house of worship if that is your choice as well. But I want to make sure that above all, we respect our freedoms, our liberties, and our rights. That's the foundation of this democracy. And for me, that's what any personally held difference between us that can be imposed on everyone among us. Let's make sure that we do the right thing at the right moment, and that means protecting these rights and freedoms. Thank you so much for asking this question. Appreciate it.
You see me? There we go. We have time for 4 more.
How you going? How's it going? How you doing, Beto?
Yes.
A little nervous, as you can tell. My dad, he instilled hard work in me, and that's one of the main reasons that I love you as our future governor, because you're a hard worker, and that's amazing, you know? My mom's a teacher. She's been teaching for over 30 years, a second grade teacher over in Spring Hill and Longview. She loves you too. She watches all your streams, and you're just an inspiration to me, man. I just gotta say, I think that internet right now should be a utility. I believe that utilities are something that actually is necessary for you to succeed in society, and which is why I love your rural expansion of you know, the internet and everything. So I just believe that utilities are something that really helps you succeed in life, and internet should be one of those. Because if you don't have internet, let's be honest, you're failing. You're not failing, but you're not getting as far ahead in life as you could. So
that's right. Thanks for being here, and please tell your mom I said thank you for the support and the love out there. This is a really good point, and I'm glad that you're raising it here in Fort Worth. It's something that we could raise in El Paso or Austin or Houston or Dallas or these major metro areas where we may take for granted the fact that we can easily get online. But that is not the case for more than half of rural Texas today. In fact, we were just in Hemphill, Texas, in East Texas, and Gina, who heads our policy team, she gives me a little readout on every county, every community that we go to, and one of the things on that readout is the rate of internet access. In Hemphill, 5% of the community has access to high-speed internet. And so if you are a farmer, a rancher, try getting what you grow or raise to market if you can't get online. If you're a small business owner, try hiring or filing your taxes. If you're a student, try finishing your education. If you're single and you're lonely, try finding a date, right? Somebody that you can be with. You can't do it. But I love the nature of this question, because isn't this something in the 21st century, 22 years into the 21st century, we should just be able to count on? Well, there was a similar philosophy about electricity almost 100 years ago. 1936, Congressman, not yet Senator or President, Lyndon Baines Johnson, works with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on something called the Rural Electrification Administration. What they said is, look, these big, powerful utilities and corporations, they'll never wire your town for light because it's just too expensive. They won't make enough money off of it. So we will step in, not with a handout or a giveaway, but if you're willing to form a co-op, a cooperative of the people who live in that community, we'll meet you halfway. And we'll make sure that we have the resources so that your kids can read by electric light before the next day of school, just like the kids right here in Fort Worth or New York or Tokyo or anywhere else around the planet. And I've met people who are old enough to have been in the first grade in 1936, and it's emotional when they talk about it. They lived in these small rural towns in Texas, and all of a sudden, they mattered just as much as anyone else. And you know what? FDR, LBJ did it for the right reasons, right? But those towns produced the most ardent yellow dog Democrats in the country for decades. But when Democrats fail to show up in these same small towns today, and then Republicans don't have to either because there's no competition on the November ballot, those folks go unrepresented. Nobody's fighting for them. They're unable to hold anybody in power accountable. And right now, Greg Abbott is sleeping on them. I know that because we just held this town hall in Decatur about an hour away. I asked the last time that Greg Abbott took questions, just like I'm taking questions, in that town. He's never done that. He thinks their votes are in the bag. Doesn't have to show up for them, does not have to lift a finger. In fact, he vetoed the Universal Service Fund, which is part of the Texas budget that underwrites rural telephone and internet. Their bills are going through the roof. Someone said, I pay $140 to get online. I can't even get online with the speed that allows me to do anything worthwhile. We're showing up for those folks right now. We're holding these town hall meetings. We're promising that we're going to extend rural broadband, reopen their closed public hospitals, make sure that we defeat this movement for vouchers that has taken away their public tax dollars and sending them to private schools. We're standing up and fighting for them, and we're going to win their votes and deliver for them. Thank you for being here. Ms. Connell.
3 more questions.
Hello, Bethel. Lovely to meet you. My name is Lauren Ortiz, born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. All right, so my question is, we have a lot of educators in here. So I actually worked for 5 years in out-of-school time programs in education. It highly helps public education, especially in Texas. Most of the funding comes from the federal government, and what out-of-school time means for everyone is after school or before school. So that means for a lot of blue-collar workers, these programs are essential, and especially a lot of communities that are already underserved. Title I schools, for example, the kids get dropped off at 6:50, and kids honestly can't get picked up, especially elementary and middle school, can't get picked up till 6:37. So you either have teachers staying not paid, they can't see their kids, us who are running these programs on no money from the federal government. And one thing I noticed in my work is there's no budget from the state to help with that. And the state, I always thought, like Texas, that has the resources, we shouldn't depend on the federal government entirely. We should be able to have these programs, and especially in these communities that are already struggling, because mom and dad go to work at 4 in the morning and kids are like just dropped off. So my question is to you, if and when you become governor, what kind of programs would you like to instill, and how will you acquire the money so it's something that forever Texas will be given the right to have out of school time for public educators?
I love this. Thank you. So, one part of the answer to your excellent question is to ensure that we have universal all-day pre-K in the state of Texas. Right now, it's a function of luck or money, and some people who have neither are at home with their kids right now, when those children could be beginning to learn to read and to write. And at that age, 3 or 4 years old, we begin to address another problem, which is that 7 out of 10 in Texas cannot read at grade level. That problem did not start in the 4th grade or the 3rd grade or the 2nd grade. We've got to start reaching these kids in pre-K, and every single one of us has a vested interest in those kids being there, because every one of those kids, once they get that better education, they're going to be able to do better over the course of their life. They will earn more. They'll be able to buy that house, pay property taxes, lessen the burden on you. And their folks, very often their moms, who right now are at home with them because they don't have childcare or access to preschool, are unable to work, unable to finish their education, unable to start a small business and hire other people and create wealth and opportunity. It hurts the Texas economy to the tune of $9 billion a year to not have affordable childcare and access to pre-K in this state. So that's a great place to begin. Further answer is, I want to work with you because you understand this far better than I do, to make sure that we supplement that with other programs that help working parents and their kids across the state of Texas. And then the last part of this, the question's asked, and it may be on your mind as well. Man, Betsy, you want to do a lot of things. You want to pay teachers more. You want to take us from 51st in the nation in mental health care access to first. You want to fix CPS. You want to ensure there's a cost of living adjustment for retired teachers. How in the world are we going to pay for all those things? Mentioned earlier, we've got the resources in the state, 9th largest economy on the planet. To some degree, it's a matter of priorities. Right now, we're spending $6 billion a year on Greg Abbott's stunts at the Texas-Mexico border, involuntarily activating 10,000 members of the Guard for a 1-year deployment, building a few miles of a border wall, at your expense, sending migrants on buses to New York and DC. Nothing about that is going to solve the legitimate problems we have. If we came to the table with solutions like a Texas-based guest worker program for folks who want to come here and work jobs very often that others will not, if we make it easier to safely and legally and orderly join your family, or to claim asylum without waiting 6 years for your claim to be adjudicated, which is what we're doing right now, we would clear all that off as a challenge, and we could focus on those who choose to do us harm by trafficking illegal drugs like fentanyl or trafficking in human beings. That's a solution at a much lower cost than what we're wasting today with Greg Abbott's stunts. Imagine redirecting that money to early childhood intervention and education. Imagine earlier we said, we will never again, if we have anything to do with it, ever imprison one of our own for possession of a substance like marijuana that's legal in the rest of this country. It brings in $1 billion a year in additional net tax revenue and savings from no longer incarcerating people, overwhelmingly black and brown, by the way, and also allows them to participate in the economy, because today, if you've served time for marijuana, on every job application form, you have to check a box saying that you have that conviction, making it less likely that you get that job. Try getting a student loan to improve your education and your earning prospects. It's much harder. So in addition, y además, we're going to expunge the arrest records of everyone who's served time for marijuana possession in the state of Texas. We'll have more revenue to direct to this. And lastly, here in Tarrant County, your appraisals for your homes went up 15%, right? Hopefully you were sitting down when you opened that letter from the Central Appraisal District. If you're a renter in Fort Worth. You're paying much higher rents today because that property owner is passing through the taxes in higher rents to you. So if on average, your appraised value went up 50%, what do you think Walmart's appraised value in Fort Worth went up? It went down -6%. Walmart can hire the lobbyists and the attorneys to contest their appraised value and bring it down. Your school district, your city and county governments still need the revenue. They're not going to get it from the big corporations, so they will tax you at a higher rate. When we win this, we're going to make sure that there is fairness in our property tax system, that corporations, including Walmart, pay their fair share. That brings another $4 to $6 billion in every year to lower your property taxes and to direct more of those resources to our most vulnerable, to our youngest, to the very kids that you're talking about. Great question. Thanks for asking. All right, this time.
A little bit, I'm in the middle, right here.
I see
Okay,
it.
my last 3 questions is this gentleman, this lady, and poster.
I think there was some question inflation there, but we'll take them. We'll take them.
Just one.
Hi, Beto. I would just like to say thank you for coming out to Fort Worth.
Thank you for having us.
My question was actually about cannabis. I work as a probation officer out in Parker County, and I see a lot of it about cannabis. I am very in favor of decriminalizing cannabis as well. My question is, I know that cannabis, marijuana, weed, whatever you want to call it, is a gateway drug for a lot of probationers, a lot of people. And I see a lot of meth use, opioid use, any cocaine, fentanyl, and it really expands people's horizon to drug use. So what is your plan to combat that with the decriminalization of marijuana?
Thank you for this super thoughtful question. Right now, cannabis is sold in the black market, and the drug dealers or the people who are selling it are also selling other things that are also illegal, because all black market drugs are treated the same. They're all Schedule 1, as though using meth is anything comparable to using marijuana, right? So that drug dealer has every incentive to make marijuana a gateway drug. If you're going to him or to her to buy that, well, let me allow you to try some of this or this other substance or the other. I'm just trying to sell as much as I possibly can to you. When we remove marijuana from the black market and we start to control and regulate its sale, here are a few things that happen. One, it stops becoming this gateway drug to other drugs that are sold in the black market. Two, one of the fastest growing areas of sale for marijuana today is in middle school. High schools are a close second. I've got 2 kids in high school and 1 in middle school. I absolutely do not want them to use marijuana. Ulysses Molly Henry, if you're listening to this, I do not want you to use marijuana. But right now, those drug dealers do not distinguish or deny sales to anybody. If you've got the cash, they are willing to sell to you. Now, do we have a problem with kids using tobacco? Absolutely. But that problem has declined over time. The rate of kids using tobacco, smoking cigarettes, even vaping today against what they were doing in 1970 has declined precipitously. At the same time that use among this same cohort has risen for marijuana. Taking it out of the hands of drug dealers and making sure that we regulate its sale will keep it out of the hands of kids as well. And then this last point, we got to make sure that we address substance abuse, to these other issues that you brought up, these other drugs, as not a criminal justice issue, but as an opportunity to help people who very often need a hand up, right? If you're addicted to something, if you're struggling, I mentioned these veterans who told me about not wanting to be prescribed an opioid because other veterans have told them, and I've heard those same veterans say, you know what, was prescribed an opioid at the VA, became addicted, the VA cut me off, they set an appointment for therapy 9 months down the road. In the meantime, I was suffering, and they tell us, I'm buying heroin on the streets right now, I'm buying opioids that are illegally manufactured, I'm buying fentanyl, because it's the only thing that makes me feel better. Now, to incarcerate that guy as a criminal for just trying to medicate himself, and it could be someone else who wasn't a veteran, but who doesn't have access to a doctor or a mental health care provider and is just trying to get right for herself, that person does not belong behind bars. We're not going to make her a better person. We're not going to diminish the likelihood that others will buy drugs. They need some rehabilitation. they need some assistance and some care, let's do the right thing. So you're another person that I want to stay in touch with because of your work in Parker County and the folks that you've been involved with through the criminal justice system. I bet you have some experience and expertise that you could share with me that we would all benefit from. So thanks for asking the question. Cynthia just gave you her card, and I look forward to staying in touch. Thanks for coming out.
2018. Thank you for that. You helped me register 145 brand new 17 and 18-year-old voters from my government class. You helped them understand the value of voting all the way down the ballot. A nonprofit organization was going to reimburse our district to bus those young, eager voters to early voting. Our Secretary of State, Ken Paxton, sued the district, threatened to cut off our funding if they allowed this to happen. Fear! Enter activism. The kids were pissed. We organized carpools, 3 and 4 to a car, and they all went to vote, along with about 700 classmates that were already registered to vote. And they haven't forgotten that. I also flipped. I was a lifetime Republican until 2018. Not looking back. So I share that with my now 7th grade Texas history students in their wide-eyed innocence, and I can see the wheels turning. Thank you for being what you are for Texas. We need you in office.
Thank you.
And I'll be available for that TEA commissioner position.
Thank you for being here. Now, we all need each other at this moment, right? Like, just another opportunity to remind ourselves that it's not going to be any one person, not even the candidate, certainly not the political party that's going to win this. It's got to be all of us. And so another plea to sign up with us, to knock on doors. Folks in yellow vests are happy to take your information and put everybody to work. Thank you for the work you did in 2018 and the work you're doing now to ensure that we win in 2022. Love that spirit. All right, Ms. Turner.
Question, last question to you, right, Beto, of the stage right over here.
Here we go.
First of all, Beto, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm curious, what are you gonna do to make schools safer? I'm talking about, even in the aftermath of Uvalde, I could not stand by and do nothing, so that's why I'm here today.
Thank you for being here. And we're all doing this for you. You know, I mentioned earlier that at some point, given the inheritance that we got from those who preceded us, who are willing to serve, to sacrifice, to struggle, so that we could have this opportunity. What we do with it defines us in the eyes of our kids and the generations to come. You're going to live with this for far longer than I will. I want to make sure that I come through with you, that I pass this judgment. When I meet with these families in Uvalde, they're counting on us right now as well. They want to make sure that we remember their kids, their names are never forgotten, that we know the details of their lives, what made them so special. They want to make sure that there is justice. We still do not have answers from the governor and the Department of Public Safety about why there were more than 100 people, armed law enforcement, on the other side of an unlocked door for more than 70 minutes, who never went in to save the lives of those kids or those teachers. But they also want action from us, and that's what you're asking for right now. What are we going to do to make sure that we save the lives of those kids who are counting on us today. When I showed up at that press conference the day after the Uvalde massacre, I went to listen to what the governor was going to say. I was hoping, because I was there to hear the governor in El Paso when in 2019, 23 of my neighbors were killed by somebody with an AK-47, another weapon of war, fueled by hatred, really inspired by people like Donald Trump and Greg Abbott, who are warning about invasions and infestations and, defend yourselves and take matters into your own hands. And he said at that press conference, we're never going to allow something like this to happen again. We're going to make the changes. The only change he made was to make it easier for violent criminals to carry guns on our streets. Did away with the license to carry program that had stopped over the last 5 years 38,000 people from buying and taking out a firearm on our streets because law enforcement deemed them too dangerous. Turned his back on those cops, on those sheriff's deputies, and turned his face right towards the NRA and signed that into law, making us much less safe. So I went to that press conference hoping I was going to hear something different, and I didn't. And I stood up and I said, listen, the time to stop the next school shooting, the time to stop the next massacre is right now. I mentioned it's more than 11 weeks since that day, and nothing has happened to make it less likely that it will occur again in the state of Texas. What can we do? Some have said, look, Beto, at my school, in this district, here's what we could do to harden the schools, to make sure that there are fewer points of entry, to make sure that we have protocols that will better protect the lives of kids and teachers and parents. I love that. You know your schools and districts better than I do. Mental health care challenge. I don't buy that, but even if you do, let's say this. We're 51st in the nation, and Greg Abbott, the month before Uvalde, withdrew $211 million from the mental health care budget of our state to pay for political stunts at the border. So yeah, if you want to fully fund mental health care, I am all about it. I won't be happy until we go from 51st to 1st in the nation. But with 5 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history in this state in the last 5 years, you either accept that we are inherently murderous and violent and just like killing one another, or that we do not have the laws on the books that allow us to defend the Second Amendment while still protecting the lives of the people in those classrooms. That's where I land. And so here's what we can do. How about this? Month after the shooting in El Paso, 8 people were killed by a gunman in Midland, Odessa. He bought an AR-15. He tried to buy it from a licensed gun dealer, didn't pass the background check. But because we don't have a universal background check in the state of Texas, he was able to purchase that same weapon from a private seller, no questions asked, and it was legal. Use that firearm to kill 8 people in that community. So we could have a universal background check. It might not stop every instance of gun violence. Let's acknowledge that, because the other side will say, well, Beto, that won't stop this, that, or the other. It might not, but it would have stopped that one. Or how about this? A red flag law allows us to intervene before it's too late. If someone who has a firearm is saying, you know what, I want to shoot myself, or I want to shoot my partner, or I want to go shoot somebody at the school or at my workplace, we can, through due process, intervene, remove that firearm from the household, and make sure that it is not used against someone else. That would have stopped the Uvalde shooter. He was sending signals off in every direction. His friends called him the school shooter before he ever walked into that school and shot anybody. And then there's this idea, which I've heard your mayor, who may or may not be a Republican right here in Fort Worth, say that she supports. What if, at a minimum, we raise the age of purchase for an AR-15 or an AK-47 from 18 to 21? We would have bought 3 more years for that shooting in Uvalde. But I mentioned these Vietnam-era veterans who are my heroes because of the fact that they were asked to fight this war that nobody understood, came back to communities like this one, to indifference at best, sometimes the outright hatred of their neighbors, and still got after it, building up this community, raising their families, serving the next generation of veterans, as I mentioned. These are the same guys who approached me and said, hey Beto, that AR-15 was originally designed and engineered for use in battle, specifically for Vietnam. It's supposed to be able to penetrate that enemy soldier's helmet at 500 feet and knock him down dead. The fact that it's being used against kids who have no helmet on their head at 5 feet instead of 500, this isn't right. So I just happen to be of the opinion that no one should have an AR-15 or an AK-47 unless you're on a battlefield or a war zone. These are the kind of things that we can do together to make sure that we save the lives of the people in this state while still defending the Second Amendment. Thanks for being here. Fort Worth, thank you for having us out. Los Ángeles Restaurant, muchísimas gracias. We'll stick around, brother. Thank you.
We would love to take a picture, say hi. We will be up on the stage. Line will start on stage right. So come on over.